The concept of a soldier being betrayed by their homeland is one common in many forms of media. One of the more prominent examples of this would be the boss in the game Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater. However, Itachi also fit this bill, in that he was forced to do something bad on behalf of his village and then accept all of the blame for it. In his own way, Shisui was also a victim of this circumstance, and that his Sharingan were stolen by Danzo, the man who was at the head of the organization that Shisui and Itachi had dedicated their lives to. The concept of the loyal soldiers scorned from his village is a common one, and it deals a lot with duty and honor, something Hashirama Senju considers to be the true will of fire. But something else Metal Gear taught us was that leadership changes, and the ones issuing orders now won't always issue orders. That is the world that Shisui and Itachi find themselves in. Having successfully performed a coup, Fugaku Uchiha now stands at the head of the village as the Fifth Hokage, a title taken by force. But trouble is brewing in the world, and it stands as living proof that the narrow-sightedness that Shisui and Itachi warned him about was indeed a fact. And now the world will suffer because those with the eyes that could see the truth were too blinded by hate. Ironic, but alas, I've prattled on far too long. Did you not come to be entertained? Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you're subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Fugaku sat in his chair by the desk of the Hokage. This desk had once belonged to 4 others besides himself, all men who had earned their seat as well as the recognition that came along with it. Fugaku had not been this way. The seat he now held was one he pilfered from the previous holder. He knew that. The entire village knew that. He turned around and looked out over the village, reclining in his seat as he did so. He reflected on all he had gained and all he had lost, the latter of which being a lot and the former of which being far less than he hoped. You see, the village hardly recognized him as Hokage, but merely as a dictator who showed up out of the blue to claim a throne that was not his. The Hokage monument sitting above his office had yet to even begin putting his face on it. Fugaku was having a hard time finding stonemasons willing to add it on. That was the way of things. He was leader in name only, and while the shinobi of the village did as he said, there was an air of sarcasm to it, and a general feeling of uncomfortability. Everywhere Fugaku went, he got the side-eye. People were staring daggers into his back, and he could almost hear them calling him a false Kage. In truth, Fugaku was beginning to wonder if he was right. For as long as he had lived, Fugaku had desired this position, but now that he had it, he was left utterly disappointed. The means by which he had taken this title were not worth the many sacrifices he had to make, but alas, now the Uchiha were in charge. It was Konoha's fault for having sent a kill squad in to destroy the Uchiha. Their hand had been forced. They would have wished to not kill anyone, but they did. They had to. Not a night went by where Fugaku didn't think about it. Fugaku had been feeling really guilty for having killed Naruto. He had felt guilty for killing Hiruzen, especially after boiling over Itachi and Shisui's explanation. So many shinobi died that night, and so few of them actually deserved to. That night had to be the single most tragic night in all of Konoha's history. Blood had not been shed in this part of the land of Dire as much as it had been since the time of the Warring States period, during which the Uchiha and Senju were at war. It seemed that this curse was in their very blood. Their ancestors had fought for blood, and now Fugaku and his children had fought for blood. Unable to hold back, unable to stave off his rage and need to get even after the death of his beloved child, he killed Hiruzen, which had landed them in hot water. The coup, the battle they had waged, had left the village tired out. The Uchiha were nearly destroyed, the Anbu were severely crippled, and the regular shinobi had been eaten up by the rampaging Ninetales. That being said, the Ninetales found its way into a worthy vessel, an Uchiha who had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan during that night. With the best seal he could put on him, as well as the Mangekyo Sharingan, it seemed that the Ninetales was currently under control. But what wasn't under control was the geopolitical climate. Now that it had been reduced to a weakened state, Konoha was nothing but a shell of its former self. It was vulnerable, and the other nations knew it. The Third Shinobi World War had only ended a few years earlier, and now it looked like another might start. The Fourth Shinobi World War. As they spoke, the other villages were poking around territories within the Land of Fire. Every day, the shinobi would be pushed back by the sudden arrival of Konoha Nin. In most cases, the shinobi would simply abide by the commands of Konoha's shinobi and leave the area. It seemed that they were being courteous, but Fugaku didn't expect that to last very long. Fugaku would sit there and wait until Shisui and Itachi returned. "How was the mission?" he asked as he kept looking out of the window. "We found shinobi from the hidden waterfall poking around where we'd been told. We informed them that they weren't allowed to be here, and if they didn't comply, deadly force would be used," Shisui said. "They complied, so nobody was killed," Itachi followed up. Fugaku nodded. This was for the best. So long as nobody died, peace would remain, but therein lay the issue. There was a chance some of the shinobi might panic and kill the opposing enemy, or perhaps vice versa. Perhaps it would be the enemy who would make the first move and kill a shinobi while panicking. Fugaku had been attempting emergency talks with all the other Kage, but they had seemed to stall. He came to realize that war was on its way, and nothing he could do would be able to stop it. So he simply decided to prepare for war. The shinobi of Konoha were beginning to prepare begrudgingly, and Fugaku knew that this would lead to Konoha being weaker than it should be. The council hardly trusted him. It was everything he could do to even get them to convene with him, but what else did he expect? He killed two of their highest-ranking members. He had to turn to his Uchiha council members to pick up the slack. The Fire Daimyo had yet to approve Fugaku as the next Hokage, but also hadn't denied it. So for all intents and purposes, Fugaku was in limbo. The world was balancing on the tip of a spear. It was a real hair-trigger situation, and Konoha's Hokage was basically an empty chair. "I don't know what to do, boys. Were we wrong to do what we did?" he asked. Shisui and Itachi looked to each other and then back to Fugaku. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Fugaku sighed. "I don't have to grant you permission. The very fact you asked for it tells me everything you were planning to say." Shisui then spoke. "Sir, I don't think it was wrong at all for the Uchiha clan to assert itself after what happened, but I do believe that the mindless killing of the third Hokage Sarutobi was a massive mistake." Itachi then spoke. "I informed you, father, that he was not responsible." "He was culpable," Fugaku responded. Itachi nodded. "Yes, he was culpable. What you desired was justice for your people, and that was admirable, but you failed to look at the bigger picture of what such an action could do. I don't mean to criticize you, but hindsight is 20/20, and we can only learn from the past. What we need to do now is calm down and look to the future, and begin to decide what the best course of action is in protecting the village. Even if that action is..." Fugaku looked to him, questioning what he might say next. "Even if that action is you giving up your position as Hokage to a non-Uchiha." Fugaku's face showed no anger, no refusal to listen. No, it showed instead consideration. He focused and looked out the window. "Do you think that would help to unite Konoha once again?" Itachi nodded. "The Uchiha have hurt a lot of people, and we've been hurt. I think personally that what you need to do is make an official report on the actions that happened during the Uchiha clan massacre. Release them and see what the public opinion of these things are. And if they're negative, use them as a reason to step down. If they're positive, see if you can't convince them to support you. That's the best thing I can think of." Fugaku nodded. "Who would be Hokage then, if not me? Do you happen to know any powerful people who would work well as a Kage?" Itachi shook his head. Shisui stood there for a moment. "I think I have one." Fugaku stood there before a camera that was broadcasting to the rest of Konoha. When he was officially stated to be live, he began to speak. "About a month ago, the Uchiha clan seized the leadership of Konoha, to which I'm sure you are aware. I feel the need to acknowledge this situation now, and allow you all a say in how your village is run." Fugaku seemed nervous. He had spoken in front of crowds before, but the whole village was a different can of worms. He straightened his papers and continued. "At about 3 a.m. on the night of June 25th, the Uchiha clan compound came under attack by Anbu agents. This resulted in a battle that decimated a large portion of the compound and led to the deaths of many Uchiha. This includes my own wife and my youngest son, Sasuke. By divine intervention, the Uchiha clan managed to turn the tide of battle and push the Anbu out. But with the threat of our very existence in the balance, we were forced to take action. That action led to us taking out the head of the Anbu, Mr. Danzo Shimura, as well as the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. We also seized the Nine Tails to aid in our efforts, and utilized Inoichi Yamanaka against his will to send a message. Something that has understandably damaged the relationship between the Yamanaka clan and Konoha. During the course of the coup, I assumed control as the Fifth Hokage in an attempt to stabilize the village, but in truth, what I did was for the best of my clan. Can you not imagine what you would do in a situation where you stood loyally with your village, only to have it betray you? At that time, revenge was deep in my heart, as was the fear that inaction could lead to our eradication. We felt as though we had no choice." Fugaku seemed to begin growing emotional as he spoke into the camera. "Today is July 22nd. Normally, we would be preparing for my son's birthday, but instead, I'm haunted by the memory of holding him in my arms, watching him perish, the arrow of an Anbu archer protruding from his ribcage. I watched my son die that day at the hands of the village I dedicated my life to. Fugaku cleared his throat to help him regain control of the emotions that were slowly spiraling downward. All the same, I realized that the men we killed that night, in both the Anbu during the compound raid as well as the shinobi killed in the uprising, were all sons of fathers and mothers, and may have themselves been the father or mother of a child who may be watching now, feeling the same pain in their heart as I do. Once more he cleared his throat as he was beginning to fail at keeping it together. I cannot and will not apologize for defending my clan. It was my duty, as it was yours, to attempt to defend the Hokage, and I will never ask you to apologize or disavow your actions. But if I were to apologize for anything, it would be that this coup was not bloodless, and that justice was taken into our own hands instead of the hands of the people. I will not ask you to forgive me, nor will I expect it, but I want you to open your eyes to the pain around you, and realize that the hurt you're feeling right now is the hurt the Uchiha felt, and is the very reason why the coup happened in the first place. Danzo Shimura ordered what we now know was an unauthorized strike against my people, and he was eliminated as retaliation, with Hiruzen being retaliated against due to culpability. The full report will be released to the press in the upcoming days for review of anyone who desires to see it. This includes eyewitness testimony on all sides, pictures taken of the scenes, as well as evidence gathered by an independent source. After this, I will hold a village-wide vote, and every clan that has decided to grace this wonderful village with their presence. This vote will allow you to decide whether you wish for me to remain as Fifth Hokage or to give it up to a new Hokage instead. Thank you for your time. God bless the land of fire, God bless its many shinobi, and God bless the wonderful village of Konoha. The address to the village came to an end. Fugaku sat there for a second as memories of Sasuke and Makoto came flooding back. Itachi walked over and hugged his father. "Are you okay?" he asked. Fugaku nodded. "Yeah, I am okay. Tomorrow would have been your little brother's 7th birthday. Your mother and I even had a present ready for him, and he'll never receive it." Itachi hugged his father tighter. Fugaku had truly been disturbed by this event. It gave Itachi a whole new view of his father. Itachi now knew where he got it from. His peace-loving nature, his desire to protect others, his intelligence and sense of duty. It all came from his father. Fugaku had just been around long enough to become a pessimist, and as time marched slowly, Itachi felt like he too might be becoming a pessimist. How ironic. Itachi had originally set out to oppose his father, and in the course of a single month, he had become him. A few days passed by, and the information released was all the media and news outlets could talk about. Village-wide voting was opened up with the choice to keep Fugaku as Hokage and the choice to oust him in favor of a new one. Fugaku waited patiently in the Hokage's office, watching the results on a CRT TV that hung from the corner of the room. He had it on Konoha News Network, where they were covering the counting of the ballots. It was pretty close it seemed, but Fugaku found himself devoid of care for the results. They counted meticulously throughout the night, and as the morning came, the results were in. The majority of the clans wanted Fugaku gone, and the majority of average citizens wanted him gone as well. It was still a close poll, but in the end the people had spoken, and they wanted Fugaku to step down. So Fugaku addressed the village, spoke and said that he accepted the results and would step down as Hokage, and began searching for a good replacement. Thanks to Shisui, they found one in Tsunade. It took some convincing and maybe a small dose of Kodoama Tsukami, but they managed to convince her to come to the village and accept the position as the true 5th Hokage. The people cheered, and it seemed that the village was slowly reunifying. While the village and the Uchiha were still at odds, things were getting better. Fugaku went back to the compound and found that many of the homes that had burned up had been demolished. Some of the plots of land had brand new houses being built on the foundation, and others had burned out buildings where occupants simply decided to repair instead of replace. Fugaku doubted that his own home could be saved, as it had burned so intensely that barely anything was left. He and Itachi both were surprised to find a brand new building had been built in its place. It had been explained that the Uchiha had come together to build him a new house. Fugaku entered the building and saw how much it looked like the same old house he knew before. And while this caused him to smile, it was a bit bittersweet for him, as he knew that he would not see his wife and child in this house again. "What's wrong?" Shisui asked. Fugaku looked down. "I don't know if I can live here, alone. Not after having had Makoto and Sasuke running around." Itachi put his hand on his father's shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. I'll still be here with you." Fugaku smiled. Shisui then appeared behind them. "Me too." Fugaku looked back. Huh? Shisui smiled. "As it turns out, my own home was never replaced. I have nowhere to live right now and no money in my bank account. Since you're afraid this house is gonna feel pretty empty, why don't we scratch each other's backs? We'll all stay together. We'll party every night. It'll be fun. Itachi laughed. What do you say, Dad? Fugaku looked down and thought for a moment. Shisui spoke. I know I'm not family, and I know I can never replace them, but maybe I can at least make that hole a little smaller. Besides, I have benefits. I know where Danzo kept his secret sake stash. The best stuff you can get, old stuff. Sake that saw the first Hokage. What do you say? Fugaku couldn't help but laugh. All right, you've got a deal. And so the three of them partied their woes away. After a large meal and plenty of sake, they were all red-faced. Fugaku sat there with what he had said would be his last glass. He raised it. This is for Sasuke's birthday. Happy birthday, son. Wish you were here to enjoy it with us. Wish we could be there to enjoy it with you and your mother. And here's to you as well, Makoto. Thank you for loving me like you did, and for making with me the family of my dreams. Itachi and Shisui raised their glasses. Hear, hear. They all drank it back. They were halfway to passing out, so after this, they decided to just head for their own respective bedrooms, where they proceeded to crash and sleep. The morning came a lot sooner than they would have liked, but there was a call for them all. They all rose up despite their heads and stomachs screaming at the poisoning of their livers from the night before, and made their way to the Hokage's office. They found Tsunade sitting there at the desk. This is a fine mess you've left me, Fugaku. Wait, are you drunk? Fugaku shook his head. No, not drunk. Hungover. Can you please not talk so loud? My head is killing me. Tsunade shook her head. This is a fine mess you left me, Fugaku. Just today, our shinobi engaged with shinobi from the Hidden Sand. This has caused the Sand to declare war on Konoha. Other villages have pledged their support as well. This is the 4th Shinobi World War, Fugaku. Fugaku looked at her. Sorry. Tsunade was dumbfounded. You led the entire world in what could be the bloodiest conflict since the Warring States period, and all you have to say is sorry. Fugaku rubbed his temples. What do you want me to say? Please have mercy. I didn't know what I was doing, but I'll single-handedly take them all up by myself? You think I can just call up Rasa and say, this is a bad time. Can we reschedule our world war until, say, 2 years from Tuesday? It's all I can say, Tsunade. The best I can do is offer you my support, but remember, you're Hokage right now, so this is up to you to solve. Tsunade didn't take this comment lightly, and she was sure to give Fugaku a greater headache than he had before. But in the end, he was right about one thing. She was Hokage now, and this meant that she was going to have to be the one to drag them all out of it. As the war went along, this provided the perfect opportunity for Tobi to move in and collect a tailed beast. The first beast to collect, of course, was Shukaku, the One-Tail, the beast of Suna. The One-Tail was currently in the body of a child named Gaara, son of Rasa, the 4th Kazekage. Despite the familial relationship they shared, Gaara was always under attack, and always the victim of assassination attempts that Rasa had ordered. And now that the village was in the midst of a new great ninja war, this meant that they would need the One-Tail. So Rasa was once again putting together a new assassination squad, or so Zetsu had told him. Obito proceeded to infiltrate Suna, kill off, and then take the disguise of one of the assassins. Luckily, it seemed that the shinobi whose persona he had taken up was mute. Perhaps that's why Zetsu told him to choose this one. He wouldn't have to speak, just show up, nod his head, and proceed with the attempt. As it seemed, Gaara had a bad habit of leaving himself wide open. My, you're a confident little murder machine, aren't you? Obito thought as he listened to what they had to say about Gaara. Honestly, there wasn't much that he knew about Gaara other than he controlled sand to a wondrous degree, but he still wondered how it was that even the strongest shinobi of Suna couldn't just off him in a flat second. There had to have been something about him. Was it possible he was just that good? And if so, why in the world would Rasa desire to have him killed? This assassination attempt almost seemed too easy, so why were they trying so hard? Obito, of course, didn't underestimate Gaara. He simply wondered why, a surprise he was interested in learning about. He watched as they displayed the diagram of positions and where everything was supposed to go. Obito would follow them and go to his position, although he didn't plan to do anything. He simply wished to watch. As the moon hovered above the village, it gave the yellow sand in the distance beyond a blue tint, and lit everything up well, despite there being no streetlights. To be honest, the darker part of the village was almost too perfect for an assassination attempt, which almost seemed to give it away. Like, why plan an assassination in a place where people would expect an assassin to hide? Were Suna's shinobi really that incompetent? But then again, Gaara was walking into the trap anyway. Was he that confident? This boy was an enigma to Obito as he watched. Eventually, he made his way down the street until he was in the center of the zone they had agreed on. He stopped moving. The little twerp knows, doesn't he? Obito said with a smile. He began to chuckle. This is gonna be a good show. Suddenly, all of the shinobi rushed out of their hiding spots at once, attacking Gaara. As their attacks drew closer, Gaara would raise a sand shield to protect him, and not a single one of the shinobi broke through. After this, the sand spiked out in an attempt to stab into the other shinobi around him. Gaara would manage to kill 2 of the 5 of them. He would then retaliate further by swinging tentacles made of sand around in an attempt to strike the other shinobi. He would stab through one of them before using two of the bodies to smash a fourth into nothing. The fifth and final shinobi gave in to fear and began to panic. He turned around and began trying to crawl away until his foot was grabbed by the sand. He was pulled back in the direction of Gaara. This shinobi's fate is probably left undetailed. Obito watched in curiosity as this boy killed all the shinobi. As the sand fell to the ground, Gaara's position had not changed once. He had simply stopped walking. There was no detection of any emotion, good or bad, upon his face. He simply continued on his way. Obito would ditch his crappy disguise as he no longer needed it and return to the appearance he was so commonly found in, a dark cloak and an orange spiraling mask. He would appear behind Gaara to take out 5 elite shinobi sent by your father. My, how strong you must be. Gaara turned around and looked at Obito silently. Obito continued, I watched the whole thing. Your sand defense seems nigh impenetrable, and your attacks were quick, concise, and without hesitation. Accurate, too. If you watched the whole thing, Gaara said, then you'll know what'll happen to you if you attempt to approach me. Obito was unamused. I would say that your confidence is well earned. Your power's great. Obito raised a finger, but I wouldn't let it go to my head. The sand around Gaara began to churn. Obito started to approach. As he did, the sand now violently kicked up, at first into a dust devil and then into an orb of wind and sand. When Obito drew close enough, he reached out for Gaara. Gaara suddenly disappeared behind a large orb with spikes protruding from it in an effort to stab through Obito. But to Gaara's horror, Obito's hand passed right through the shell, quickly followed by his face. He reached out and gripped Gaara by the throat. He began to choke and panic. He had never once seen an assassin break his ultimate defense. For his entire life, the sand protected him from harm, from pain. But now it was doing nothing, and Gaara could feel the hands crushing his windpipe. Obito began to grip tighter. Eventually, Gaara fell limp, the sand falling to the side. Obito smiled under his mask. You let it go to your head, and now nothing will be going to your head anymore. As the months continued on, the war also continued. But slowly, it seemed that each of the nations began to pull back, retreating to their own villages. This was both strange and unexpected. What was happening? As this was going on, the villages allied with each other began to converse. Chatter began to go up here and there, and spies for Konoha managed to detect some of it. They began to mention that tailed beasts were disappearing from their villages. Before long, every village mentioned that their tailed beasts had been stolen. Tsunade was confused. She began to worry for her own village's Jinchuriki, and then sent a summon to him, telling him to meet with her immediately, but he never came. She sent the Anbu in to secure him, but when they got there, they discovered that he was already dead. Tsunade then offered a ceasefire to all villages to talk about the important issue. When they met, she mentioned that the war opened an opportunity for someone to come in and begin stealing the tailed beasts. With all of the nations at odds with each other, they couldn't warn each other of the threat until it was too late. And now they needed to conglomerate resources, as whoever regathered all the tailed beasts would have more power than any of the nations individually, and might have enough strength to destroy the whole world and usher in a new world order. This information would reach the ears of Shisui, who would go about investigating it. He would head for the Naka Shrine, where he recalled reading something about the tailed beasts. While there, he utilized his Mangekyo Sharingan, which deciphered part of the information on the stone and discovered that the connecting of all 9 beasts could unlock something far more powerful than he had once thought. Thinking back to the last time the Ninetales was used before the coup, he would recall how people had stated that it possessed a Sharingan in its eyes. It began to make sense, and Uchiha truly was behind this the whole time. He would gather information and take it to Tsunade, who would listen to what he had to say. She would be astounded by this discovery and would relay it to the rest of the nations, telling them that there was a shinobi somewhere that had all 9 beasts and was planning to use them to do something that could destroy the world. They all began searching relentlessly. That was until they discovered that there was an odd statue in the middle of nowhere. They would inform Konoha, who would begin marching on it. They found there the statue as each of the tailed beasts were being loaded into it. Zetsu turned around. They've arrived, he said. Obito looked back. Take over for me, Zetsu. Load up the tailed beasts. He turned around to face the army. As he did, he pricked his finger and touched the ground. Summoning jutsu! Immediately, he was surrounded in battle-ready Zetsu. He commanded them to charge. Tsunade saw this and was dumbfounded. She commanded her own army to charge as well. They rushed down into battle against each other. Itachi and Shisui stood there. They looked down upon the battlefield. They saw Obito down there, but that wasn't their target. Shisui pointed towards Zetsu. That guy, there. He's doing something with the tailed beasts. We need to take him down first. If we do, whatever they're planning will grind to a halt. Itachi nodded, and so the two of them began to make their way around the battle the long way and at a distance. They then approached the Geto statue from behind. Once they had, they began to slowly sneak around it at opposing sides. They peered around and saw Zetsu. Shisui and Itachi locked eyes for a moment, and Shisui nodded. The two of them then rushed from behind the statue, and Black Zetsu would look left and right at Shisui and Itachi coming in. He would jump back and away. He'd begin to utilize wood release to defend himself, and as he did, he attempted to stab them with the tree's limbs. But Itachi and Shisui dodged them before responding with their own attacks via their Shoto. Zetsu managed to avoid all their attacks with the Mayfly technique and appeared again behind them. He utilized his wood release to grip both of their legs in vines. Pathetic. You thought such an attack would work on me? He weaved the hand signs for a fireball ninjutsu, but as he breathed it, suddenly it was his body that was eaten up by flames, not Itachi or Shisui's. What? Suddenly the world around him would fade away as the rising moon in the background bore Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan. When Zetsu came to, he had not moved from his position, but instead was being eaten up by Amaterasu's flames. He looked up in terror as Itachi stood above him. Pathetic. To think that such an attack would work on you. Zetsu burned away to ash. But to the horror of Shisui and Itachi, the Geto statue began to mutate. It seemed that in the last moment, Zetsu managed to seal the last of the tailed beasts. The statue became the Ten Tails. Itachi and Shisui began to retreat. Obito looked back with a smile. The Ten Tails, it awakens! He suddenly tossed his mask to the side and utilized the Rinnegan he managed to pilfer earlier to seal it into himself. He rose up into the air. As he regained control, he began to effortlessly decimate the rest of the shinobi on the field. Shisui and Itachi attempted to attack him, but were both easily pushed to the side. They tried their best to cast Genjutsu, but Obito was resistant. Itachi tried to cast Amaterasu, but the attack was absorbed by the Pretapath. With little left in their repertoire, they then attempted to utilize their Susanoo in battle against Obito. They fared better this time, but it wasn't quite enough. Obito remained stronger and managed to throw them back. What are we supposed to do? Itachi asked. Shisui thought about it. If we unite our powers, like we did during the night of the coup, maybe we'll be strong enough. Itachi and Shisui then began attempting to utilize their Susanoos in conjunction with each other. This gave them an increased power boost. They began to strike out at and attack Obito, who was now, finally, after so long, taking damage from their attacks. Despite this, they were still pushed back. It had become a battle of attrition, and Obito had infinite stamina through the Ten Tails. Itachi and Shisui did not. They needed an extra boost. Itachi looked back. Dad! Fugaku rushed to their side. Layer your Susanoo on top of ours. Give us your strength. Fugaku nodded. He bonded his blue Susanoo as well. It bore the weapons of all the Susanoo, including the Yara Mirror and the Blade of Tatsuka. With that mirror, the Susanoo managed to block attacks that any of their Susanoo alone would fail to protect against. Once Obito's defense was broken by the perfect parry to his attack, the Susanoo shoved the Blade of Tatsuka into the chest of Obito. With that, the blade managed to pull Obito in while separating him from the tailed beasts, and with that, the battle came to a close. With the entire world being tired from their war against the Ten Tails and its Jinchuriki, they agreed to an armistice to end the fighting. The tailed beasts would be returned to their respective villages and everything would become peaceful once again. As the sun set over the Uchiha compound, Shisui and Itachi watched from the upstairs window. This is not at all how I planned things would go, Shisui said. Itachi laughed. Yeah, for me, I expected that all we would need to do is cast a Genjutsu and everything would be fine. But instead, it expanded into a massive international incident. Shisui thought about it. I feel like if Danzo hadn't tried to take my eye, our families would still be here. Itachi pat Shisui on the back. That wasn't your fault and it wasn't mine either. We did what we had to do. If anyone's to blame, it's Danzo. Shisui smiled. Itachi then turned around. I'm going downstairs to get something to eat. You want something? Shisui nodded. Sure. As Itachi left, Shisui took one last look into the setting sun, and as he did so, he could have sworn that he saw the faces of his mother, Sasuke, and Makoto smiling back. You coming? Itachi asked. Shisui turned around. It had been a hard year, but it had all turned out okay. Despite having lost sight in one eye, he was still doing well. Now, it was time to celebrate. I'm on my way. And that's where I'm going to end the story. I hope you enjoyed it. I liked telling this story and exploring what each character might have done when put in these situations. I hope it was everything you were expecting. Did you like it? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when our videos drop. And while you wait for those, try out these other videos. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Anyway, until next time, peace out.